Thank you for having me here. As Brian said, my name is Denise Hellickson, and I'm with the Village Employee Assistance Program. That's your EAP benefit through the Village. I've been there for about 13 years. I do counseling, training, and consulting. And more, the last few years, I have seen more companies requesting this topic of recognizing depression or anxiety, understanding kind of the warning signs and the symptoms, and how we can all be more aware and help each other out and also take better care of ourselves. And I think the reason we're seeing that is because we're all starting to feel more and more kind of anxious or depressed, or there's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot going on in our personal lives, there's a lot going on in the world and in our country in general. And I think that can add to a lot of these feelings. So I've given you the PowerPoint slide so you guys can just kick back. You don't have to worry about taking notes if you don't want to. At the end of your handout, there is an evaluation form that I'd ask that you fill out at the end just to give us some feedback on the training topic, what other things that you might like to see in the future. And I'd also like this as a small group, so it'd be really nice if you guys have any questions or comments or thoughts as we're going along. Please feel free to interject, and let's keep this informal. I'm glad it's a sunny, beautiful day outside because this is kind of a heavy topic. And it's always easier to do it when it's a gorgeous day and the sun is shining. So with that, we'll just get going. And I wanted to talk first of all about the fact that with depression, we all have to keep in mind that is a normal human experience. That is a very normal emotion that we all go through. And sometimes it can be very intense and it can feel very much like it's intruding in our lives. But we all operate within this continuum of mental health. And most of us are in that middle. It fluctuates, but we're kind of in the middle. And depending on what life throws at us, depending on our stressors and our health, you know, some days are better or worse, and it ebbs and it flows, but most of us are in that middle point. For some, you know, we're on the farther spectrum of mental fitness, where we have a lot of resiliency skills, we have a lot of positive things working for us in our life and a good genetic background. And so that mental fitness is more prominent. For others, we might struggle depending on genetics and predispositions and health and, like I said, life circumstances. And we might be falling more towards that mental illness part of the spectrum. For today, we're going to talk a little bit about just the signs and symptoms of depression in general. And then I'm going to talk more about major depressive disorder. And that's more when it's clinical depression, and we're looking at this is more than just life skills. But I also want you to keep in mind today that if you are feeling like maybe you're exhibiting some of these signs and symptoms, or you have a loved one or somebody you care about that's exhibiting some of these things, it's really hard to diagnose whether it's clinical depression or it's situational. And it's not our place to do that. Really, it's just about being aware and knowing when life is starting to get tough. And maybe we are starting to have some symptoms that are getting hard to deal with alone. And being aware of that, or talking about that with your friend, and getting the support services so that you can have people who know about depression kind of help you move through that and figure out what that is. I know in our EAP program, we have more and more people coming in with anxiety all the time, more and more people coming in with depression. And not all depression, again, a lot of it is situational. A lot of it is life gets tough, and we've hit the mother lode and we are having a hard time. I'm sure there are people in Harvey that have experienced Hurricane Harvey that are experiencing some huge situational depression that probably looks a lot like clinical depression, but given what they've gone through, maybe not. So you don't have to have a diagnosis to be able to go in and get some support and help. But what we're going to talk about right now is just the major depressive disorder, or the clinical depression. And I think the good news here is we're learning more and more about it all the time, and it is very treatable. There are a lot of people that are being treated for depression right now that successfully living lives, very happy, healthy, moving forward with their life. And we're learning more and more about it, and it's not always that you need medication. Sometimes we do, but sometimes just that knowing that we have it and learning lifestyle skills to manage it can make a big difference. And there's not one size fits all here. And so for everybody that's experiencing it, it's good to go in and talk to somebody, first of all, to find out Is it major clinical depression? Is it situational? And then come up with a plan that's going to be right for you based on your experience and what's showing up for you. And we'll talk more about that later. What major or clinical depression is not? It's not just the blues. It's not just feeling sad or down in the dumps. We all feel that. It's not a sign of weakness, not a bad attitude. It's not something that people can just snap out of. And a lot of people suffer in silence because they realize there's something going on with them and they don't know what it is and they don't know how to get themselves out of it. And there can be loved ones that are very frustrated with them because of that, because you just seem mopey or sad or flat, like you're not feeling much at all. You know, do something, get yourself out of this, pull yourself up out of this dark place. And with clinical depression, that's not any easier than telling somebody with diabetes, just will yourself to metabolize that candy bar. Just do it, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so we have to be aware that a lot of times people suffer in silence because of a stigma that says somehow we're doing life wrong, and that's why we're feeling this. And I think more and more we're breaking through that barrier, and more people are realizing that this is just like any other health issue. But I think there's still a stigma that if it's anxiety or if it's depression, we're supposed to be able to figure this out. Would you guys say that's true? Do you think there's still stigma around? What have you heard, or what are the things that you think kind of are involved in that stigma?
I think they can just get out of it by just being better.
They're just not trying hard enough.
An assumption to think about. Probably along those lines, the ease of being out of it. It's not a big deal, just let it come and go.
Yep. Yep. You're just doing this for attention, or you're just a bummer. And so again, I think when you think about some of those biological disorders that affect us, our emotions, like anxiety, again, and depression, what we have to realize is it's the same as I was just talking about with diabetes. You would never tell somebody, you don't need that insulin, just will yourself to process sugar. And you're just not disciplined enough, right? You wouldn't say that about high blood pressure or cholesterol or arthritis. And we have to get to the point where we start realizing that depression is the same thing. It's not that we don't want to feel better. Most people aren't sitting around going, I think today is a great day. I think I'm just going to be mopey and sad. Yeah, sign me up for that. It's something that I want to feel better, but I am not producing enough of those chemicals, those feel-good chemicals in my system. My brain is not producing that, the other parts of my body, it's biological. And I can't produce enough of those chemicals where I am feeling better. And so when we can have compassion for people and start to wrap our own head around, what do I tell myself about some of these mental challenges? And do I attach a stigma to that? And the more we can start to normalize it as just another physical issue, the more we can help ourselves and others. Because again, there's good news for this and a lot of support if we can talk about it and we feel okay with it and we're able to reach out. Two types of depression that I want to talk about today, the major clinical depression. There are other types of depression. There's seasonal affective disorder, which I'm sure you guys have heard about, that it affects, with not enough sunlight and not, again, producing a lot of those chemicals. There is, manic depressive disorder. There are a lot of other types of depression, but the two I wanted to talk a little bit about was dysthymia, and that is when for people that have been assessed by a professional, sometimes it's chronic and long-term. And again, this is probably based on a genetic predisposition, but it's like we're kind of bumping along at the bottom of the pond where it's not bad enough where we're not able to cope. We're getting through the day, but it's the difference between surviving and thriving. I'm pushing myself through the day, but I don't have those periods of highs where I'm feeling happy and I'm feeling a sense of well-being. I'm really pushing myself along during the day. And so we're not feeling really great, but we're getting by. And people can have that for a long period of time before it's detected. With major depression, the symptoms are much more severe and pronounced. And so you will see, where I'm not even surviving. I'm having a hard time surviving. I'm having a hard time maybe getting to the office. I'm not communicating with friends anymore. I'm just pulling in. And so it starts to affect more their ability to function. And actually, when we're looking at depression, a lot of times the difference between situational depression and major depression, the difference is just the severity and the pervasiveness. First of all, is there a reason? Is there something that happened in your life that's caused your inability to function? And then, even within that, are you able to get to the office? You might be pushing yourself to get out the door or get out of bed, but you're making it. There are moments in the day where maybe you're able to connect with people and feel a little bit better. And with major depression, that's very difficult. The pervasiveness is such that we're not able to do the things that we typically do. And for, they can say anywhere from 3 to 5 days of just, maybe I can't get myself off the couch, haven't talked to anybody. Okay, now we're in a major depressive state. Any questions or thoughts about that? So how common is depression? I think you all probably know that it's more and more common. I bet there are people in your personal lives that good friends, family members that are struggling with depression that you know of. And it's becoming more and more, I think, common all the time. And the research still shows that there are more women coming forward than men that are being diagnosed with depression. But I think we also know that a lot of that it's still because of a stigma. And a lot of times men still aren't feeling as comfortable coming forward and getting the resources and the support they need. So I think that's getting better. I know in my own practice I see a lot more, I see a lot of men and women and all ages coming in because they're feeling depressed and they're not sure what to do. And again, this affects all ages. There isn't an ethnic factor, there isn't an age factor, there isn't really a gender factor that I can see that makes this more worse. We're all feeling it. The thing to keep in mind with major depressive disorder, clinical depression, is that it is, again, when I was talking about, your body is not producing those feel-good hormones. And so, it affects our mood, it affects us physically, and affects our cognitive ability, how sharp we are. And so it affects all 3 of those areas. And we're going to talk just a little bit more about each one of those. The mood changes. For people with depression, I think we commonly think about the depressed or the sad state. What I have typically found with people with depression, and my mom, she was probably in her late 70s when she was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, clinical depression, and I think she'd probably been one that had been in dysthymia for a long time. And again, my sister's a school psychologist, and I do counseling, and sometimes we don't see it. It's so subtle that we just think, well, that's just who they are. But my mom was diagnosed with depression. I did not see a person that was sad or crying or mopey. What I saw was somebody, I started to kind of feel like, where did my mom go? She wasn't the same person anymore. And rather than that sadness, it was more the irritable mood. And I would say, even more than irritable, full-blown anger. I mean, she had a hearing loss. And so she'd say, what? And if I raised my voice, there was a certain tone in my voice she heard. Man, she went from 0 to rage in no time. Don't talk to me like that. And even when I would say, I didn't mean anything by it, I was just trying to talk louder so you could hear me, she didn't have the brakes on her anger. And that's what I find with a lot of people that have this. I had a good friend after she gave birth to her second child that went into postpartum depression. And when I asked her what that was like for her and how did she know she needed help, she said the same thing. She said, it wasn't that I was sad, no brakes on my anger. Even when I knew that this was probably not a big deal, I couldn't not be angry about that. So sometimes that's what you see, and we don't always think about that with depression. Not with everybody, but sometimes. The other thing to keep in mind is this word called anhedonia, and that is, again, with severe depression, where people are just not producing enough of those feel-good hormones where they're feeling any of the sense of well-being or calm or good feelings. They can't. And so that's where we start to feel really frustrated and isolated and alone, because I don't have any of that. I see other people that are feeling good and I can't get there. And then other people might be misunderstanding it, or I love you and I hate to see you hurting and I don't know how to help you, so I just get angry with you. Just stop it, right? And so that can help them to feel more alone. Quick question for you. What time of the year would you say there is more threats of suicide and major depression? What time of year would you say that is? January? What about the rest of you? Anybody else have better?
I heard once it was like from September till about October.
Okay, so kind of when we're heading into those darker. I think that can be true with the SAD and the seasonal affective disorder, and when we can start to feel more of that depression coming on. And I think for a lot of us, we kind of start to get into that hibernation mode a little bit. I know I do. But when we start to see the highest risk for suicide is in the spring, which seems really counterintuitive, right? It just doesn't seem like that would be the time. And the reason for that is a lot of us are starting to feel, as we're moving into those darker periods and those colder and less light, we're all starting to kind of get into that slump a little bit. But as the spring comes and the sun shines out and people are getting more energy and they're starting to do things and they're feeling better, people that are experiencing this anhedonia or that severe depression, they can start to feel like, I'm still there. I'm still in the dark. I'm still feeling this depression, and everybody else is feeling better. And sometimes that's when that hopelessness kicks in. This just isn't going to get better. Physical changes. And again, this is a biological illness. And so you have to realize that just like with not having those good hormones that help us to feel better, it also affects us biologically in other ways. So if I'm feeling more stressed, I don't have those calming chemicals that are helping me to calm down. I'm not feeling a sense of well-being. I'm not obviously going to be sleeping very well because I can't settle down. And so either I'm sleeping too much, I crawl, I throw myself out the door and get to work, and I go back on the couch and take a nap before bedtime. I'm sleeping all the time and I never feel rested. Or I can't sleep. I'm exhausted. I finally get to go to bed. I can't close my eyes because, again, I'm just feeling all these stress chemicals. So along with that's going to be fatigue. You can have appetite changes where I'm grabbing energy all the time. I'm so tired that I'm just eating constantly to just get that energy. Or I have no appetite. I'm not eating it at all. So those are just a few of the things. You can have, muscle tension. A lot of times you can have a lot of physical discomfort with major depressive disorder as well. And then obviously the cognitive changes. You can imagine if I'm not getting any of those feel-good chemicals that help me to realize that maybe I'm safe right now, help me to calm down, help me to deal with the world around me, and I'm not getting any sleep, and I'm not getting really good nutrition, you can imagine all those stress chemicals in your system, how that's going to cause you to feel, I'm not feeling safe. The world isn't a safe place, and there's something wrong with me maybe, and I don't know what it is, but I see other people functioning and I'm not, and I don't know why. So you can get a lot of ruminating thoughts and worry and fixation on things, high anxiety with depression. And again, that sense of there's something wrong with me. I'm the problem. I should be able to figure this out, and I can't. So there can be a lot of just abusive self-talk and anger with ourselves because why haven't I figured this out right now? And then distortions, like my mom, when she heard that, tone in my voice, and that just made her react. And so a lot of times we can take little things, and because we're not feeling safe, the world isn't safe, and there's something wrong with me, we can really start to distort things and misinterpret things. Maybe somebody walks by us and they don't say good morning, and we're off and running with, they hate me, they're out to get me, they've never liked me because they didn't make eye contact with me this morning. And that can sound humorous, but when you're thinking about somebody who's just feeling lost and I don't know what's wrong with me, again, it just keeps that cycle going of more stress chemicals, more feeling unsafe, more evidence that the world isn't a good place for me. And it affects us at work, and it affects us in other places. I can, when we're depressed, you can be reading the same sentence 4 times, and it's like you got a Teflon helmet on, nothing's going in, because I'm just not able to focus or concentrate. That spaciness, maybe somebody's told us 3 or 4 times, and it's not sticking for me, or I just have these moments where I gap out, where I'm just kind of not there. And decreased attention and focus, all of those things and more. And again, when you look at these signs and symptoms, again, when I go back to that continuum, we all feel some of these things from time to time. It's normal. If we've been in high stress situations, if we've had situations happen to us. The difference between normal human experience and depressive disorder is the severity and the pervasiveness. So when you're looking at a screen, and this is just something, this was from the DSM-5, looking at some of the things that they look at when they're looking at, is it a major depressive disorder? And having 2 to 5 of these issues, and I put them in your slides so you can take a look. But depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. When they're looking at the screen, the 2 to 3, I think 2 to 5, yes, I have these. You have to have 1 or 2. Okay, if you've got some of these other things, but you don't have number 1 or number 2, you're not going to be screened as major depressive disorder. So number 2, diminished interest or pleasure in almost all activities of the day, nearly every day. And again, both of those speak to the pervasiveness and the severity of what you're going through. The other things you can read through on your own, and it kind of goes to those symptoms as far as the physical changes, restlessness, anxiety. Here are the others. And I bet most of us, when we read through that list, if you're honest with yourself, you felt all of those things. I have. But again, it's the severity of the situation. And even if it's not severe, the one thing I want you to keep in mind is life throws us some pretty hard curveballs sometimes. And there are times when, even though it's within that range of normal, I'm having a tough time with this. And it is totally okay to say, I don't need to be diagnosed with something to go get some support and get some help for that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be medication. A lot of times, if I'm within that normal range of just, this is a situational issue, I've had a severe extreme loss or high stress or whatever, just going in and getting some support for self-care and how to increase relaxation and do some mindfulness and some of those things can make a big difference in getting you through those and not kind of struggling by yourself. And again, with that screen, the thing to keep in mind is they also look at not only the symptoms, but are they being caused by a physical illness? Again, if you've got some major thyroid disorders or adrenal gland issues or other physical issues, that's going to affect your hormones, it's going to affect your chemical balance, and you might be struggling with some of these things, but it might not be clinical depression. It might be, like I said, thyroid or something else. And so it's always good to get a good physical if we're feeling these things, to rule out some of the other issues that if we clear that up, maybe these other things will go away. The other thing they look at with the major depression screen is, again, is it situational? That's one of the first things I ask people. What's been going on in your life, right? If I just have been in a high stress situation for, I've been like toxic stress way too long, and I think a lot of us, that becomes the norm. But, and all of a sudden I experience a major loss on top of that, yeah, I'm going to be feeling some pretty serious depression. But it's situational. It's not, you're still functioning even though it's hard. You're not at the level that you would like to be, but you're bumping along, you're getting stuff done, and you're grieving. That's going to be a determining factor. Any thoughts or questions yet? See what I mean? It's good the sun is shining because this is not a happy topic, but I think it's an important one. Lifestyle management, whether we're dealing with a major depressive disorder or we're dealing with normal life depression. And again, that normal life depression can feel extremely severe at times. It can be really difficult. And I've been through some of those situations myself. My dad had Alzheimer's a few years back, and it just got to this critical point after some very stressful years and many years of grief and loss, grieving the process. Other things going on in my life, I had some financial issues that came up and job loss for myself that came up. And so life was just kind of heaping it on for me for a while. And by the time, my dad finally passed, and you're finally able to take a breath, I was really hit with some serious situational depression where I was just feeling depleted. And I could probably have ticked a lot of those boxes. And so whether or not, it doesn't matter if we have a diagnosis. If I'm feeling some of these things, this can help all of us that are experiencing depression. And the first one is just obviously regular adequate sleep. And even though that is not an easy thing to come by, it's just recognizing that, sleep is more important for me right now, or relaxation, or trying to find some ways to relax and calm down. So maybe I'm not getting good sleep, but what can I do to start unplugging and get good sleep hygiene? So maybe I'm not, looking at my phone or the computer all night long, but I'm shutting things off. I'm dimming the lights. I'm, taking a hot bath. I'm doing some things to relax. I'm calming myself down so that even though I'm maybe not able to sleep 8 hours, I'm relaxing more, I'm calming, I'm doing some things that help me to feel more restful. Some other things that can help with that is, just even journaling. I say one of the best things I've found for people that are having a hard time sleeping is a legal pad and a paper shredder. And just a lot of times our mind won't shut down. And that's a thing that just keeps going and going and going. So, just sit with that legal pad and write down everything that's in your head. If you have to, don't look at the clock. If you wake up in the middle of the night, just start writing if you can't, if nothing else is getting you back to sleep. Whatever's in your head, uncensored, no judgment, because when you're done, you're going to throw it through the paper shredder anyway. Nobody else is going to see it. But when you write it out, you don't use your laptop or you're not just thinking, your mind has to slow down to keep up with your hand. And we're focused in on those thoughts and we're paying attention. And sometimes that's enough just to quiet us down enough to get us to sleep. Healthy diet and nutrition. And again, realizing that this is a challenge for people. But if I'm one of those that is grabbing food because I'm just so tired, am I grabbing good food? Am I doing Twinkies and Mountain Dew, or am I grabbing, stuff that's going to give me some good energy so that I'm recharging my battery instead of it just spiking with my blood sugars going berserk? Because we don't need, if we're dealing with depression, situational or major depressive disorder, our system is already out of whack. We've got a lot of stress chemicals going on, and we don't need to mess that up with more of those blood sugar spikes and other things. So just thinking about, how can I get good nutrition? If I don't have any appetite, do I have snacks that I can just graze on through the day so that, I can't even think about eating a whole sandwich, but maybe I can munch on some almonds or I have an apple. And throughout the day, I can just get enough to keep me going. Regular aerobic exercise, and I don't know about you, but when I'm feeling depression, this is tough. Actually, be honest with you, when I'm not feeling depression, this is tough. But it's even harder because I'm mentally exhausted. Depression is exhausting. And so all we want to do is, like I said, go from a nap to bedtime. But when we can get ourselves up, and I'm not talking about, joining a gym or training for a marathon, just move. Just throughout the day, just get up and move around a little bit. Walk around outside. Do anything that gets you moving, because it's going to burn up some of those stress chemicals and it's going to help you to start producing a little bit more of those calming chemicals for those of us that can do that. So it's going to be helpful for you. And so start where you can. Don't shame yourself or blame yourself, and there's going to be days when I don't feel like doing it, but when you can, how can I incorporate, park farther away from the grocery store and just walk a little farther, whatever you can. And then not abusing chemicals, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, because a lot of times depression and more chemical use goes hand in hand. And it makes sense because, you know, I'm trying to get some good feelings going here. I'm trying to calm myself down, but we're using the wrong chemicals to do that. And I'm already, my system, my internal system is out of whack. There's way too many stress chemicals going on. There's way too much anxiety going on. And so when I add some of these things, it just makes that balance worse. It just keeps throwing chemical issues on top of chemical issues. So, you know, if you have caffeine in the morning, you have your regular caffeine in the morning. Just don't, you know, if you have 2 cups, usually have 2 cups, but don't have 6. It's not going to help you. Drink more water and flush out those chemicals that are already in your system and those stress chemicals, and do some movement to kind of try to manage the internal chemical system a little bit better. Lifestyle management. They are finding more and more with brain studies just how important it is, how many exercises we can do to really enhance our sense of well-being and enhance that personal care. And mindfulness, I can't say enough about it. It is one of the practices that I teach a lot for a lot of different things because it's a quick grab. I don't need to go to a class. I don't need to meditate for 30 minutes. I can grab some quick mindfulness exercises throughout the day. And they say, you know, if you're doing that throughout the day, maybe 3 minutes of focused breath during the day. And just some moments where I'm sitting having my lunch and I'm actually focused in being in this room right now and tasting my sandwich. Or I'm in the shower and I'm actually in the shower. My mind isn't on automatic pilot. I'm not a morning person, so in the shower in the morning, I'm pretty much not there. But I have worked on being present. You know, what does the water feel like? Okay, what does the soap smell like? What colors do I see in the bubbles? And that's mindfulness, being totally present in this moment. And what they find is that if you do 3 to 4 minutes of 3 minutes of mindfulness during the day, it's the same as meditating for 30 minutes. It starts to rewire our brain. It starts to help us trigger that prefrontal cortex that starts to give us more of those calming chemicals and helps us to feel a sense of well-being and helps us to calm down. And so there's a lot of great apps on the phone for this. There are, again, just even doing the focused breath, following, just sitting for a few minutes. What I have people do is, let's just sit for a minute and say, what am I feeling right now in this moment? And have it be an emotion. Most people even have a tough time with that. You know, most of us, I have a lot of people coming up with, I feel like I need to talk to my daughter. Nope, that's a thought. Let's try that again. What are you feeling, right? So what are you feeling right now in this moment? And where are you feeling it in your body? All of our emotions have a physical component, but we usually tune it out. We're usually stuck up here and we're not getting in contact with the rest of what's going on with us. So no judgment. I know that I'm feeling anxious. I know I have some butterflies in my stomach. That's it. I know where I'm at, and I'm not going to judge that. I'm just going to be with that, and I'm going to focus on my breath for 3 minutes. I'm going to just, you know, follow the air patterns in and out. And so what does that, am I feeling the air in through my nose, down the back of my throat? Am I getting it down in my stomach? What does that feel like again when I exhale? And your mind is going to, even for 3 minutes, your mind's going to fly off because that's what our brain is made to do. But every time you know that my mind is not on my breathing and I bring it back to my breathing, you're going from stress brain to prefrontal cortex. It's like doing mental weightlifting. So if I've done 3 minutes of breathing and in that time my mind flew off 200 times, I just had a great mental workout. And I'm rewiring my brain. So mindfulness can help with anxiety and depression and chronic pain and an overall sense of well-being, stress management. So I highly recommend you guys check into that, or you recommend it. And this is something that's bite-sized pieces that people can do. Even most depressed people, if I'm laying on the couch, I can focus on my breath. Okay, so we can do this. Relaxation and self-soothing activities. And one of the things I would say is self-compassion. How am I talking to myself, right? When I realize that I don't have energy, am I chastising myself? Most of us, the way we talk to ourselves, we sound like we are manic, evil, drill sergeants. We're abusive to ourselves, we're critical, we're shaming, we're blaming. And one of the things I usually ask people, what are you feeling right now? If your best friend or your child or your spouse was feeling what you're feeling, what would you tell them? Okay. Think about what you would tell them. Now, what are you telling yourself? Most of the time, those are very different. When I know what I would tell somebody else, say it to yourself out loud. Okay? It's all right that you're depressed. Everybody feels that way once in a while. You're going to feel better. Just take care of yourself. When you hear your own voice giving yourself some kindness, you start to calm down, and it's very powerful. And so think about those relaxation and self-soothing activities. And am I being kind to myself? If I saw somebody else that was depressed, would I be kicking them and blaming them and shaming them and telling them that they're awful for this? No. I'd show them some kindness. And then fun and recreation, obviously, the more we can stay connected to people, this can be a very isolating illness, and the more we can feel connected to people, the more it helps us to realize that we're not all alone. We do have people here that care about us. And so sometimes the hardest part is getting ourselves out the door. And if you can push yourself out the door, a lot of times that's half the battle, and we can have a little bit more fun. And personal growth is really just about, again, do I have meaning and purpose in my life? Do I feel like the things that I'm doing make a difference? I have to get to the office tomorrow because people are depending on me. Okay, that personal growth and that sense of purpose, sometimes that's the motivator that makes or breaks whether we call in sick or we get our butts out the door. And so having that is very important, and it can be a great motivator. Having pets, I can't stay on the couch because my dog's looking at me and he needs to go for a walk. I'm not going to do it for myself, but it's easier to get out the door for that. And then lifestyle management. I always say, like I talked about earlier, that this is a biological issue. This is just like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, arthritis, anything else. So the best thing you can do is, first of all, if you haven't been in to see a doctor for a while, get a good physical and find out if everything else is working okay. Because maybe depression is secondary to what's actually going on. Taking prescribed medication appropriately and if needed. Not everybody that has depression needs medication. But if you do, there's nothing wrong with taking that any more than taking insulin for diabetes. There's a lot more they know about the medications. There's a lot more options. Dosages can be different. It's monitored. I would say go to somebody that specializes in, depression and anxiety and the mental illnesses, so that you are, getting somebody who really can help you figure this out. You don't know how many times I have people come into my office and say, I'm depressed and I don't want to take medication. Stigma again. And I'm not a pill pusher. I don't think that everything needs medication, but I think where it's warranted, we should be thankful it's there if it helps us. So don't rule it out, and look at some of those other things as well. Regular counseling and therapy, sometimes processing our losses, dealing with those stressors that got us here, getting some of those coping skills, those mindfulness exercises, it starts to empower us, because instead of life happening to us, I'm more self-aware. I know what's going on for me. I know what those symptoms are, and I have more tools that I can use to take care of myself. So it can be very empowering. How to support others. The thing to keep in mind is a lot of times when I am the one suffering from depression, I am not, because it's a disorder that deals with our emotions and our cognitions, I might be the last one to know just how much this is affecting me. And so it's helpful to have other people. I know with my mom, it was finally Deb and I saying, Mom, you know what, you've been through a lot with Dad, with the Alzheimer's. Let's just go in. It's okay. Of course this has been a lot for you to deal with. You've been with somebody for 60 plus years, and now you're dealing with all these losses. Let's go get some support. You're not having that person that can help and get people there is very, very helpful, because they sometimes are the last to know. When my mom finally did, and she did need medication for anxiety and depression, and it was like getting my mom back. It was like all of a sudden there she is again. And I didn't recognize this little 5-foot rage monster that was showing up before that. So sometimes we don't have to diagnose, just noticing with others that you care about. Does it seem like they're not themselves for more times than not? You know, I mean, everybody has days where we just feel out of it, or we feel like we're not functioning like we typically do. But if you're starting to feel like, where did that person go? They're just not the same anymore. Can we talk to them about that in a way that they don't feel judged, and in a way that just says, I just care, and life gets rough, and how's it going? And so really don't wait for, sometimes we don't want to be intrusive, and so we wait for them to let us know if they need help. And I think we need to do it in the reverse and just let them know we care. The other thing is that a lot of times they feel isolated, and having that sense of connection, and there are people around me who care, makes a big difference. So when you can reflect back to them, you know, what have you seen? And, you know, do it in a, you know, what's my intention here? If I'm frustrated and annoyed with them, that's not the time to talk about that, obviously, but what am I seeing? And why am I concerned? Encouraging them to participate in activities. When I was going through a lot of that with my dad, and after his passing, I just felt flattened, and you know, I was just getting through the days for months at a time. And I had a good friend that would, you know, say, come on, let's go out Friday night. You know, well, Monday that sounded good. By Thursday I was thinking, what am I thinking? And by Friday I was coming up with a good excuse why I couldn't go. And she was having none of it, and she did it in a nice way, but she would just eliminate every excuse I came up with, you know. Well, you know what, I'll just pick you up, and whenever you want to go home, I'll just take you, you know. And it was like, oh, all right, I guess I gotta go, I got nothing. And getting out the door was the best thing for me, because again, it was that push, but it was that friend that, you know, wasn't chastising me, but was just eliminating those excuses that helped me get out the door. And that can be very helpful. And obviously, don't ignore statements of hopelessness or extreme detachment, suicidal comments. A lot of times we, you know, we don't know what to do with those, and they scare us. Or we think that they're just doing it for attention, and so we don't want to, you know, reward bad behavior. But never, never, never ignore those statements. If you're concerned about somebody, if their gut feeling is, if your gut is telling you that this is serious, don't ignore those things. Take them at their word, okay? If they are just doing it for attention, they will probably figure out quickly that that's not how they want to get attention, because people are going to take them at their word. But a lot of times people are feeling hopelessness in that sense of, you know, they might be saying things, I mean, most of them don't come right out and say, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow, right? But they say things that make you start to feel like they're thinking about checking out. Have you ever, what kind of comments might concern you guys? What might you hear from somebody that might be having some suicidal thoughts?
Goodbyes.
Saying some goodbyes, acting like they're saying not just have a good weekend, but it's been good knowing you. Yeah, absolutely. Talking about just hopelessness, you know, it just doesn't matter anymore. People would be better off without me. I'm a burden, right? Some of those things that just start to sound like they're not just having a bad day, they are really starting to alarm me about their ability to get through this. So, some of the things, if they talk about killing themselves, obviously, but I don't mean, you know, in casual conversation, sometimes people start to get fascinated with ways to do this. And so they might be on the internet looking at, you know, what type of prescription medications will do the trick, what type of weapons will. And so you might see them preoccupied with some of that subject matter, feeling incredibly hopeless. Hopelessness and helplessness are two of the key ingredients for people to start coming to that sense of suicide. I don't see any way out of this. I don't feel like I have the influence to change my life. I don't feel like I have any way. I'm in this dark place. It doesn't get better, and I don't see it ever getting better. That's where you start to hear people talking about suicide. So any of those factors red flag. And again, if nothing else, just trust your guts, because a lot of times the alarms and the bells and whistles go off for you, even though they've said something pretty veiled. You feel it. Trust it. Some of the behaviors, increased use of drugs because I'm trying to get myself to feel better. Really risky behavior. I don't care. Maybe I don't have a suicide plan, but if somebody else takes me out, I'm totally fine with that. So I'm maybe driving erratically, or I'm doing really risky behaviors because it just doesn't matter to me if I'm here or not. Again, looking for a way to kill themselves. I'm talking about exploring those options for what would be the best way on the internet, checking out books, talking about some of these things a lot, having this be a focus of their conversation and their interest. Severe isolation, like you talked about, saying goodbyes, giving away possessions. And one of the things that can be a real factor too is sometimes people will just start to feel very calm and less stressed and less anxious. You might see somebody that's been in a really dark place and really anxious and all of a sudden they just seem calm. And sometimes that is because they've just figured out how they're going to end the pain and they're not struggling anymore. And so sometimes we think, wow, they're doing better. And it's like they've come up with an answer for themselves. And so that sense of just calmness can be an issue too. How to help? First of all, just take it seriously. Whatever you're feeling, ask people. Just ask them. Assume you are the only one who will help. Sometimes we think, oh, they've got a wife and kids at home, or they've got all these friends. Surely somebody will have seen this. Assume you are the only one, because a lot of times when somebody has committed suicide, a lot of people have seen the red flags afterwards, but they assumed somebody else would help out. And there's that, if only. We don't want any of us living with that. Ask them directly about suicide. And this is a hard thing to do. It was hard for me. Every time I've had to ask this, I kind of have to push myself to do it, because it's not a normal thing to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? But it's an important question to ask. And I would say, don't ask them, are you thinking of harming themselves? Because sometimes people have been feeling in so much pain for so long that, no, I'm not going to harm myself. Yes, I am going to end the pain. Okay? So that doesn't answer the question, are you thinking of killing yourself? Research shows that, people who, you're not going to give them the idea. It's not like, well, thank you. Didn't think about that one. I think I'm going to go research that. I'm going to do it. It's not going to up the probability that they will kill themselves. And a lot of times, people are very ready to tell you. They will let you know. Either I am not, I've thought about it, but I don't have a plan, I would never do it. I've got kids to raise or whatever. Or, yeah, I have been thinking about it. And you'd be surprised how honest they are, because finally somebody sees me and hears me and cares. And I have a connection. Ask them directly, listen to their story, let them know you care, and avoid things like, debating the value of life, talking about the spiritual beliefs, talking about, people are going to miss you when you're gone, all those things, because it doesn't make them feel better. It just starts to make them feel, once again, nobody gets me. So we want to avoid some of those things that feels like a judgment or accolades. So if somebody says, yes, I have been thinking about killing myself, do you have a plan? How would you do it? And if you have a plan and you know how you do it, do you have the means? I was thinking about taking some prescription medication. Do you have the means? Well, I've been storing them up for a while. Well, no, I have to figure out how to get them. Helps you to know where they are in that plan. When? I had somebody call, and the spouse was going to be taking, it was a crisis call. The spouse was going to be taking the kids for the weekend. And it was like on a Wednesday. She had a plan for what she was going to do once the kids were gone with the ex. And so again, I don't mean to scare you guys. I hope that you hear this and you never have to use this. But if you do, just know, sometimes you get the feeling, I've had people say, yes, I do feel like killing, I have thought about killing myself. But when I go through these, I realize there is not imminent danger. They don't have a plan. They don't have the means. I don't believe that at this moment they are in imminent danger. And so I will set up other appointments and get that support system in place. And that's what I would have you do too, is just, if you find that there's imminent danger and yeah, they have a plan and yes, they're going to do this, we don't want to leave them alone, you know. I'm here to help. Let's figure this out together. We're going to figure this out together. So maybe, you know, can we call your emergency contact? Or would you mind if I call our supervisor? You know, let's work on this together so that they know it's now a we thing. I'm now invested in this and I'm going to walk you through this. Call us. If you've got some questions, we've got the 800 number. It's okay to say, you know what, I've got my friend here and this is what they told me, and you know, we just like some support, some help. You know, be on the phone and get that counselor to them, talk to HR, see what your policy is here at work as well. Worst case scenario, and this happens, keep in mind some of the places you can call. You can talk to HR or your people here based on the policies that you have. Just get another coworker, somebody else that can say, yes, we care, and we're going to walk through this with you. If the person takes off and says, I don't want any help, you have to be ready to call 911, call law enforcement and say, we are doing a wellness check. We are concerned about this person. This is what they've said. And a lot of times we don't want to do that. We can't wrap our head around that because we don't want them to live with the drama of it afterwards. And my thought is, as long as they're living afterwards, it doesn't matter. Let's take them at their word. We'll deal with them if they're upset with us later, but let's get them the help that they need. And so if that means we have to call 911, that's what we do. And we say, this is a person we're concerned about. We're asking for a wellness check. This is what they were driving, whatever. But we have to be able to do that. Any thoughts or questions about that? Okay. So just to wrap up, again, keep in mind that major depressive disorder, it is, and even situational depression, it affects our mood, it affects us physically, it affects us cognitively. Keep in mind that treatment must address all of those issues, and it's good to go to somebody to get the support you need to really figure out, like I said, one size does not fit all. What do I need based on what I'm experiencing? What do I need to get the resources and the support to help me with this? Situational depression is normal. It's a normal human reaction. It can feel intense and scary, but, and even though it's a normal reaction, there are a lot of times when ask for support and help, because we all do better when we're not going through it alone. Major depressive disorder is very treatable. There are a lot of good options and a lot of good ways to work with that, and people that have depression go on and have very fulfilling, happy, good lives. Awareness is key. Self-care is key. Being aware of myself and what's going on, being aware of the people around me, and just supporting one another. All key to helping us get the resources that we need to deal with this. Now, go out and enjoy the sunshine. Eat some chocolate, little antidote. We'll start kicking in the endorphins, because I know this was a heavy topic. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call anytime. We've got supervisor helpline that's available. We've got counselors that are available. It's confidential. So just know that if you've got any questions or want to talk about it, we're available. And if you don't have any questions, I'm going to be taking this down. If you do, you can come talk to me afterwards. Otherwise, if you would, I would really appreciate you filling out that evaluation. Just rip it off the end of your handout there and just leave it at the back table, and that would help us out tremendously. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.